Trader PhD's Commodity Chat podcast series, bringing you the latest trends in U.S. and global commodity markets, from grain prices to livestock trends, exports to weather impacts. We cover what matters most to your operation. Let's dive in.
Well, welcome back to another edition of Commodity Chat. I'm the head of market content here at Trader PhD, and joining me again, as always, is Ag Advisor Nick Lawrence.
Good afternoon.
Well, happy Friday, everyone, and happy Friday, especially too. Kind of seems like here in the commodity markets, we had a bit more of a risk-on type of day in a few markets for the ags, the equities, especially if you look at the S&P 500 index, which rose as high as 6,016 points here today. Hit that 6,000 level for the first time since late February, and the index is also about 150 points from its previous all-time high that was set on February 19. Now, that early strength did come on Friday from U.S. labor market data that showed hiring was above expectations in May. Non-farm payrolls rose by 139,000 last month compared to market expectations of 130,000. And prior months were revised lower, sending some mixed signals. But overall, just kind of seemed like a little bit of a positive day, especially in the outside markets. That optimism did kind of spill over the egg markets too, though, Nick.
For sure, I think it did. Things this morning were pretty saggy overnight. I don't want to say things were selling off, but just kind of everything seemed a little heavy. And then it seemed like as soon as that data came out, everything got in the shot in the arm, just right as soon as that appointment data came out. And I think that mixed with Trump and G having a phone call the other day, I think the markets were just kind of ready to take off and do some buying, and immediately saw it in equities and most of the energies, and then everything else joined in on the regular open and never really looked back.
Yeah, for sure. Just kind of a positive day in of itself, but kind of the broader topic here, especially as we're moving into June, kind of focusing on the summer a little bit more. That larger topic, of course, is looking at weather. And so we interview Eric Snodgrass with Nutrient Ag Solutions every week, or at least we try to every week when our schedules can align the best. But, we've been talking a lot about drought risks, and that had a lot to do with the transition from El Nino to La Nina. And to kind of paint that picture, the drought that was anchored in Mexico this winter, that was expected to move north and even east through the plains and eventually into the Midwest. And so that was raising a lot of concerns with how this crop could shape up this summer. Now you fast forward to now, that drought really hasn't been an issue, and at least in terms of the overall market, and especially as we were targeting that time period for May and June, and that just really hasn't been the case. So basically, corn and soybean planting as a whole should be done barring any replanting, but crop establishment, I'd say, has been pretty fair for at least the majority of the country.
No, drought really just hasn't been an issue at all. If anything, been dealing with a little too much rain, especially mid-south and then on down through the Gulf. Just the way the atmosphere kind of shaped up this spring produced plenty of showers across, most production areas. So really now moving forward, if drought is going to be a story, that story's potential has moved really beyond our more typical seasonal window, which we're in now, and kind of out to basically the end of this month and on into July and beyond. So if we're going to have, either a drought story or I guess lack of rain and heat story, it's been bumped out here at least a few weeks to a month.
Yeah, and we're going to keep an eye on that too, and especially in those weekly farmer forecast interviews. So if you're on our app, feel free to check that out every week as well. But Nick, you did bring up acres. And first of all, Trader PhD will be conducting its June survey soon. So be on the lookout for a link to fill that out. We did receive fantastic data from listeners for our March survey, and that had us outperforming other advisors relative to the USDA's number. I know not a lot of people agree with the USDA on a lot of things, so I guess take it or leave it on if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But this acreage debate is still on, and it still feels like the June acreage report is bringing more anticipation than that March prospective plantings report, just with how the weather is shaping up. USDA came in at that 95.3 for corn and 83.5 for soybeans. I've still been hearing a little bit of chatter that corn could be around that 96 mark, which would be even a little bit more positive for soybeans possibly, though it's still kind of hard to look past those large global production numbers.
Yeah, as far as corn's concerned, I was kind of thinking, I wasn't sure how much bigger corn could get kind of like in the mid-south and down through the Gulf. But talking to guys over the past couple of weeks, I think I could have been wrong on that. I think acres really possible they have grown. And another part of that acre mix that I don't want to lose sight of is cotton. This year, we kicked off the year expecting historically low planted acres. And initially, I was kind of thinking, okay, that could be maybe the low watermark on what acres could be. And I'm starting to rethink that with the guys I've been talking to down there. It is very possible that those acres could actually get smaller due to prevent plant and maybe even somewhat of an increase in corn. So that whole acre mix mid-south and then, like I said, down through the Gulf really is going to be an interesting puzzle, I think, here moving forward. But back to your point about global production on corn, man, that Brazilian crop just keeps getting bigger.
Yeah, definitely it continues to weigh on our markets with how big it gets. And so, Brazil wrapped up that 2024-2025 soybean harvest, and the USDA had that crop pinned at a record 169 million metric tons. You had other forecasts from Brazil coming up to the USDA number as well. It is incredible that the USDA didn't change that number at all since it began forecasting it, and you had other agencies later conform to that number as well. So now the next crop season is expected to be at a new record of 175 million metric tons, as seen by the May WASDE report. But without a doubt, Brazilian farmers are still increasing their acres. If you look at acreage numbers coming from CONAB, which is the USDA equivalent for Brazil, looking at that last season acreage estimate, farmers planted 117.7 million acres of soybeans. That was 3.5% above the previous year. And that was also the smallest growth since 2019. But, this just is a huge and large train to stop when it comes to this acreage growth. So I remember seeing and hearing a statistic that Brazil had something like 400 million acres of fallow ground that could be converted into cropland. And when the new Lula administration came in, his agriculture minister said they want to increase crop acreage by about 5% annually. So really interesting there. Take it however you want. But I also don't want to gloss over corn either. Brazilian farmers started the harvest season for that safrinha corn crop, which is the second corn crop, been growing under great conditions. We thought early in the season that there was going to be some drought issues, but that just hasn't been the case. And so CONAB forecast that total corn production for 24 and 25 at the second largest on record. So overall, great conditions for that South American crop. Of course, there is a little bit of flooding in Argentina, which has been hampering harvests a little bit, but really those exchanges aren't really too apt to lower those production estimates right now either. But I know I've been talking a lot, so Nick, can you kind of get us out of here on just some things that we're looking ahead for this month, maybe the next couple?
Yeah, with that, I'd like to remind you guys of some things coming here in June. So next Thursday, we will have the June WASDE. So we will be back with you on Friday to update you guys on that. First notice day for the July delivery contracts is June 30th, so a little over 2 weeks away for that. And in between those two things, we have the Juneteenth holiday, which should be on the 19th. The markets will be closed that day, and they will reopen that night for the overnight session for Friday.
Yeah, definitely a busy month to kind of look forward to, especially kind of looking in this weather market season. But thanks for listening for this time. Hope you have a great weekend. And I'm Dawson Schmidt.
And I'm Nick Lawrence.
And this has been a Commodity Chat from Trader PhD.
Past performance is not indicative of future results. Futures trading involves substantial risk and is not suitable for all investors.